Over the last few years in pro wrestling, we've heard the term forbidden door used quite a bit. And for those of you that aren't aware as to what the forbidden door is, it's when one company works with another company and it's mutually beneficial for both companies involved. We've seen a show from AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling called Forbidden Door, but the next step in the true forbidden door being busted wide open has been taken as WWE and TNA announced a multi-year partnership aimed at creating unprecedented crossover opportunities within WWE and TNA programming for NXT and TNA superstars. This is massive. We've seen WWE and TNA have a great working relationship over the last couple of years, seeing the Knockouts Women's Champion in Mickie James appear in the Royal Rumble, and then once again Jordynne Grace appearing in the Royal Rumble. We've also seen Jordynne Grace appear in NXT along with Joe Hendry. There's already been a lot of crossovers. The Rascals broke up in NXT, and there was the feud between Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz. There's been a lot of great stuff going on between WWE and TNA, but officially, it is now on pen and paper. It's in black and white, meaning that there is actually going to be massive implications for both programs moving forward. A lot of people are asking, though, what does this mean for WWE? What does it mean for NXT and TNA? What type of shows are we going to see? Is there going to be an invasion angle? Is there going to be, who knows, crossovers that we weren't expecting before? But one thing that we are going to get is a lot of dream matches between TNA and NXT. So I asked you over on Twitter to submit any, and I mean any, dream matches that you have whatsoever. We're going to take a look at these. We're going to discuss which ones could potentially actually happen and which ones probably aren't going to happen. But before we get any further into this video, make sure you leave a like on this thing. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss another upload. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into this thing. Let's start things off with the Hardy Boys versus Fraxium. Obviously, the Hardy Boys are a legendary tag team in pro wrestling, one of the most loved tag teams, most influential tag teams in the history of this sport. And there's no doubt that Nathan Frazier and Axiom, in some way, shape, or form, have taken a look at their tag team matches. Like, Nathan Frazier and Axiom are such a high-flying electric duo that there's no way they haven't drawn some sort of inspiration from the Hardy Boys. This matchup on paper sounds incredibly fun. I don't think we get the Hardy Boys of, like, 10, 15 years ago where they can move at the speed of what Nathan Frazier and Axiom move at. But if we take Nathan Frazier and Axiom's speed and put it up against the Hardy Boys, I think that that is like a concoction for something epic. I think that Nathan Frazier especially could get one of the best tag team matches out of the Hardy Boys in the last, 5 years plus. He is so fun to watch, and the way that he hits that next gear, I think that he could just get a true, honest-to-God great matchup out of the Hardy Boys. This on NXT, this on TNA, a best-of-3 series culminating in a pay-per-view I would love to see. Give me Axiom, give me Nathan Frazier, and give me the Hardy Boys against each other. But what about the big meaty men slapping meat? What about Moose versus Obafemi? This has to happen, okay? This writes itself, man. I think everybody can see exactly why this should be a big-time matchup. Two big dudes, Obafemi, the current world champion, Moose, the former TNA world champion, going to war against each other. Can you imagine the meat slapping that would happen in this thing? Like, truly, I think that this is like one of, if not the biggest dream match that WWE and TNA have available for them without going into the main roster. Obafemi and Moose could tear the house down. And like, if they really wanted to, if they needed somebody to go after Obafemi, a credible challenger for the NXT Men's Championship, because let's face it, the NXT Men's division hasn't been the strongest at the top of the card. This is a feud that could hold down a couple months, right? We could be looking at Moose versus Obafemi in a couple of big time matches against each other. Maybe 3 matches. Maybe we have a best of 3, best of 5, best of 7, something like that between them. But this writes itself. Can you just take a great look at the size of these men, right? Just on paper alone, this is a draw. People will tune in to see what's going to happen between Moose and Obafemi. And if Obafemi is able to go over clean on Moose, not only is Moose making a star for the future, but Obafemi comes out looking like $1,000,000, man. Can you imagine Obafemi just lifting up Moose the way that he does? And if he dominated Moose, oh my God, man. Now, granted, Moose is one of TNA's top acts, so I don't think that TNA will want him to come into NXT and get just absolutely squashed by Oba, so it needs to be a competitive matchup. But Oba, in the end, needs to beat Moose. This is just This is a no-brainer. Need I say more? Julia versus Masha Slamovich. You don't need to say anything more than that. Okay, we're talking about NXT Women's Champion Julia versus TNA Knockouts Champion in Masha Slamovich. This writes itself, but let alone having the talent that you have in Masha and Julia, like those two alone could put on a great match against anybody. And if you put them in the ring against each other, we're talking about like a certified banger, like a potential 5-star plus matchup if they give them time and they give them the story going into it. This is a really, really cool matchup that I think WWE needs to build to. This is not something that you just pull out of nowhere. You have the champions locked down against each other. You stare each other down on an episode of NXT or even TNA. Hell, I think TNA would be a much bigger impact, if you will, because Julia going over there would put a lot of eyes on TNA, and then maybe the big-time matchup between Julia and Masha happens once on WWE NXT TV and maybe another time over on TNA, or maybe it's only once at a joint pay-per-view like a Worlds Collide type of PLE or something like that. This match needs to happen though at some point. It needs to be champion versus champion. This would be a highlight match of both women's rosters on both divisions. It's a massive testament to both divisions how damn good they are, but these two are the flag bearers, the standard bearers of the women's division on each side. Seeing them link up against each other is a must-see. Dolph Ziggler versus Javon Evans. Let's put some respect on Nick Nemeth's name because Dolph Ziggler is dead and done and he's no longer known as Dolph. So we got to talk about the former TNA World Champion Nick Nemeth if we're going to talk about a TNA NXT crossover. But him versus Javon Evans is a really intriguing matchup. This feels like kind of like when Randy Orton came back down to NXT and had a match with Javon. I feel like Javon and Dolph... Sorry, I literally just roasted you guys for calling him Dolph. For Nick and Javon, if they were to have a match with each other, I think that this could elevate Javon Evans. He doesn't necessarily need to win against Nick Nemeth, but if he did, it would be huge, right? I think a loss to Nick Nth and then a handshake after with Nick Nth raising Javon Evans' hand would do wonders for his career long term. So let's get this match. I think it would be incredible. Seeing the selling from Nick Nth and seeing the high-flying action and the ability of Javon Evans in that ring is just a concoction for amazingness. I don't even know if there's any other way to put that. It would be freaking awesome, man. This match needs to happen. This one has me giddy right here, though. How could you not want to see the technical masterclass that would be Josh Alexander versus Charlie Dempsey? Hell, man, I think that this is actually going to happen relatively soon. I don't know what the status of Josh Alexander is right now, but I imagine he is interested in going to NXT. Like, I think... if I'm not mistaken, his contract has come up. Yeah, I'm just looking right here. It looks like he is going to be finishing up with TNA sometime in February. So he is on his way out. So I don't think we can look at this as a TNA and NXT crossover. He might very well just go right to NXT. And can you imagine the dynamics of that if he left TNA's side and then he went to NXT as just like the solo star and then was fighting people in TNA because they're calling him like a traitor, he's turned their back on their promotion or stuff like that. Like, that's an interesting story that could really make waves in pro wrestling and would certainly elevate Josh Alexander as a character as a whole. So there's a lot of things that we could do, but if we were to get Josh Alexander in NXT, him versus Charlie Dempsey writes itself. The masterclass in the ring would be incredible. I'd also love to see Josh Alexander if he got a run on the main roster somehow. Can you imagine him versus Chad Gable? Oh my God, that needs to happen. You know what? Josh Alexander, please sign with NXT. Okay, there's too many great matches for you here in this company in WWE. All right, move on from TNA. All right, come to NXT. Go to the main roster. You're too damn good. But what about Obafemi versus Nick Nemeth? Obviously, we've already talked about what Obafemi and Nick Nemeth bring to the table. Nick Nemeth, just an absolute star in this business, a future Hall of Famer, and Obafemi well on his way to being one of the most impactful breakout stars in NXT history. The two of them going up against each other would be incredible. The dynamic in the ring alone makes me so excited for this potential matchup, but also the idea of Nick Nemeth, I did it again, damn it, Nick Nemeth selling his ass off for Obafemi. Can you imagine Obafemi whipping him around and Nick Nemeth just bumping the way that he does? The power game of Oba would be on display. It would be a must-see match, and I think Nick Nth would make Obafemi look like $1 million. If there's any match that I'd love to see on just a casual episode of TNA or NXT TV, this is the match. This is something that I'm obviously a little bit biased towards because I love Dolph Ziggler. I cannot forget everything that Dolph Ziggler did in WWE. It should have been me, damn it, right? That should have been him becoming a champion for longer and not getting the title taken off him for Del Rio because of a concussion. But anyways, I can't change the past and I can't change injury history, okay? But what we can make happen is we can make Obafemi versus Dolph Ziggler. Man, damn it, Nick Nth. We can make that match again, all right? This match needs to happen. It's going to happen. Please book it. Nick Nth, Obafemi. Yes. But what about Masha Slamovich versus Cora Jade? It does look like this is going to happen as Cora Jade showed up on TNA Genesis. She stared down Masha Slamovich. Seemed like she wanted a title opportunity. That's probably the direction that we're moving in now. This is big for Cora Jade because I feel like Cora has been surpassed by a lot of free agents coming into WWE NXT, and she just hasn't continued that wave of momentum where it looked like she was going to be an NXT Women's Champion someday. The pop that she got at TNA for showing up makes me think that this could revitalize her career and give her opportunities that she just simply hasn't gotten yet. Cora Jade probably should be a mainstay on TNA television, fighting against the Knockouts division, getting those reps in, getting some experience with some very, very talented people over in TNA, and also being able to pick their brains along the way. She's so young, she needs to be a sponge during this opportunity and absorb everything around her. But the matchup itself, Masha Slamovich versus Cora Jade, writes itself, right? You got Masha, who is just this absolute badass in the ring, a legit killer in the ring, and then you have Cora Jade, who kind of feels like a hand-picked girl from NXT who's been protected. She's been molded into this gal that she is now, given lots of opportunities, even though the injuries have piled up. It feels like she is here to prove herself against a badass, to show that she isn't just a pretty face, that she isn't just this hand-picked person for NXT. You know, she is actually a dominant female performer and can take it to a killer, a certified killer in Masha Slamovich. If she's able to show that against her, I think Cora Jade's stock will go right through the roof, and everybody will see her for being a great performer, for being very, very good in the ring. I think this will elevate her in a massive way. Masha, Cora, it's a great idea for both sides, honestly. Julia versus Jordynne Grace, I think, is just a matter of time before happening, as it looks like Jordynne Grace is finishing up with TNA, so I don't know if we can really consider this a TNA NXT crossover matchup that's a dream match, but the idea of seeing Julia go up against Jordynne Grace is absolutely a dream match in itself. And with Jordynne Grace coming on over from TNA, she could kind of fit into that same type of role as like a Josh Alexander, where maybe some people call her a deserter. Maybe she's like the new enemy of the TNA Knockouts division. Who knows? But if she does go to NXT, there's a lot of doors that open up, obviously, in this stacked women's division. Look, Zarya versus Jordynne Grace writes itself. Obviously, Stephanie Vaquer versus Jordynne Grace, or Julia versus Jordynne Grace, right? We can go down the list of all the top talent that they have right now in NXT. Kalani Jordan versus Jordynne Grace would be incredible. A Carmen Petrovic would be fun against a Jordynne Grace. A Sol Ruka would be awesome. You know, we could go, freaking Fallon Henley would be incredible. Gigi Dolan would be fun. There's so many other matches that could happen here for Jordynne Grace in NXT, but Julia versus Jordynne is the big time matchup, and I don't think anybody's going to disagree. But Jordynne Grace coming on over, being a part of the NXT women's division, is what's best for business. This guy says Obafemi versus Josh Alexander, which hell yeah, I want to see. But also, what about Fallon Henley versus Mickie James? Fallon Henley is essentially the second coming of Mickie James. The hardcore country gal down in NXT looks like she is going to make waves with her career, and she's going to continue to get better and better every step along the way. The NXT Women's North American Champion was on fire there, and I think her and Mickie James can crush it in the ring. And also, Fallon Henley can learn a lot from a Mickie James. Mickie James is probably going to be, when all is said and done, one of the most respected women's wrestlers in the history of WWE, TNA, independence, you name it. Mickie James is one of those people who has done pretty much everything that they can in women's wrestling and then has given back to the business 10 times over. Mickie James, if she was able to have this feud with Fallon Henley, could create the next Mickie James. Fallon Henley is everything that she could possibly need to be successful in this world of wrestling. All she needs is somebody to go up against, somebody to mentor her. And hell, if Mickie was willing, dude, the idea of a partnership of Mickie mentoring Fallon Henley between TNA and NXT crossing over and then being like just this this guidance for her along the way. I would love to see that. If Mickie is willing to be a manager, or at least an on-screen manager type of role for Fallon Henley, let's make it happen. It would be so much fun. But speaking of other matches that I'd like to see on free NXT or TNA TV, Javon Evans versus Jeff Hardy is a match that could absolutely get fans to watch your show on free TV. It doesn't need to be a PLE match, because I don't think without the proper story that this could be a PLE match, but the idea of a battle of respect between Javon and Jeff Hardy could be very entertaining, and I think a lot of people would tune in for it. And this opens up the opportunity for maybe Javon Evans to work with Matt and Jeff Hardy in a 6-man tag team match or something like that on TNA. If this happened on NXT or vice versa, maybe the 6-man match happens on NXT TV, and then over on TNA is the one-on-one match between Javon and Jeff Hardy. It probably should happen, honestly, seeing how well liked that Javon Evans is with the NXT crowd and how well revered and respected Jeff Hardy is amongst the wrestling world as well. These two in the ring would create magic. It's a must-see match, and I think it should happen. But what about Ace Austin versus Lexus King? Now, no disrespect to either of these performers right here, but I wouldn't necessarily classify this as a dream match between TNA and NXT. It is, however, a match I would like to see, just to see what the result is and just to see how they perform in the ring against each other. Lexus King has come a long way, man, from his times when he first started out in NXT, and of course before when he was over in AEW. He has come a very, very long way as a performer, and it's weird to say this because I was never a giant Lexus King fan, but the more I watch him, the more he reminds me of a young Chris Jericho, which is insane to say out loud, but like if you watch his work, if you watch his style, you watch his look, he feels like a young Chris Jericho, and him going up against Ace Austin might be exactly what Lexus King needs in order to gain some more reps in the ring. Ace Austin is phenomenal at what he does, and I really do think that Ace Austin should break out as a bigger star, and he probably is going to benefit massively from this exposure with NXT and TNA. But a matchup between Ace Austin and Lexus King isn't a crazy must-see match by any means, but I think Lexus King has a lot of potential, and he has a lot to offer the wrestling world, and Ace Austin can find a way to bring that out of him. So this match being on TV, yeah, I'd love to see it. But now what if WWE was to send a main roster star over to TNA, somebody who used to be in TNA, like an Eli Drake? Yeah, LA Knight used to be a part of TNA wrestling before coming to NXT, before becoming the megastar on the main roster, and him going up against the new Impact Knockouts, I just about called that the Impact Knockouts champion, the Impact TNA World Champion in Joe Hendry. Him versus LA Knight would be pretty fun. Now, Joe Hendry and LA Knight are kind of a similar style of wrestler, where they aren't necessarily the greatest, the best wrestler in the world in the ring, but they are very solid at what they do. They know exactly how to get the job done and how to be entertaining. But where a lot of their presence comes from, a lot of their star power is from their work on the microphone. And LA Knight and Joe Hendry would have incredible promo battles against each other. I think it'd be very, very funny watching Joe Hendry have a rock concert on LA Knight, and maybe LA Knight just roasting the crap out of Joe Hendry. It's must-see TV, especially if it was to be on NXT or TNA. And if LA Knight was not really doing much on the main roster at that moment, this would be a great way to use him before we get into whatever his WrestleMania matchup would be. I'd love to see this. Joe Hendry, LA Knight, one off on NXT, one off on TNA, whenever it is, needs to happen. But the match that needs to happen out of every single match in TNA and NXT and WWE on the main roster, literally the biggest dream match available, is daughter versus father? Sure, yeah, father. Okay, Santino or Santina Marella versus Ariana Grace needs to go down. And like, look, for those of you that don't know, Santina Marella is another character of Santino Marella, who is supposed to be the twin sister of Santino, who won the Miss WrestleMania Battle Royale. This is back when WWE was doing WWE things under Vince McMahon. But her or him or they versus Ariana Grace would be a must-see matchup, and I know everybody would tune in for it, okay? I don't know if it'll happen in 2025, right? We are walking that line of what is politically correct here with the Santina Marella character, without a doubt. But even if there was just a moment of Santino Marella and Ariana Grace on TV together, I think a lot of fans would love to see that. It would be a great moment for the father and the daughter together, and why not, right? But if they're actually willing to go out on the limb and have Santina Marella versus Ariana Grace, it could be one of the one of the strangest, most interesting, like, I don't even know how to explain it type of matchups in WWE history, but it could happen. But those are the dream matches that you submitted. Obviously, there's a lot more people on NXT and TNA's roster. We didn't even touch on Mike Santana doing anything. We didn't touch on Jake something. There's the entire rest of the women's division. There's so many other matches that could be had between TNA and NXT. So let me know any other dream matches that you have down in the comment section below. And while you're down there, make sure you leave a like on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss another upload. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.